Next up, we've got Evie, who is an undergraduate biology student down in Portsmouth, and she's going to talk a little bit about microbes and some of the diseases. So I'm just going to say hello to you, Evie. How are you doing?
Hello, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Thank you for joining us. What's the weather like down in Portsmouth?
Oh, you know, lovely, windy and cloudy.
Okay, a bit of a mixture. Good. So we're going to talk a little bit about microbes. So for those that have been to the Science in the Park for real in the past, we've had these microbes hanging up in trees, and you've had to go around looking for them as part of our microbe trail. But this time we decided we'd send them down to you. So you've got a bunch of cuddly microbes there, and we thought we'd chat through some of the different diseases that they represent and so on. So first of all, microbes. There's two kinds really, isn't there? Bacteria and viruses. Is there a bit of a difference between those?
Yeah, so your bacteria and viruses, they both cause disease, which is why they're both, you know, those microbes that we think about quite a lot. The main difference is that bacteria are cells, they're living organisms, so almost self-sufficient. So they can infect your body or they can survive outside your body. The viruses are, there is a debate if they're living or under the sort of specific ruling that we have. A lot of schools teach Mrs. Gren, so they don't do all of those things. So while they can live on surfaces, which is why it's really important for us to wash our hands and things like that, they can only replicate if they're actually inside the cells in your body. So they use your cell to replicate. So okay. Not the best.
No, indeed. So microbiology then, of course, is really relevant today because we're all sitting here in the UK, mainly indoors because of the coronavirus and COVID-19, and that's why we can't hold Science in the Park. Now, this pandemic, of course, very unusual. We've not had to live through one already, but most people thought really that we were going to live through a flu pandemic. So have you've got a flu bacteria there, flu virus?
I do indeed. This little dude here.
There he is. So flu is not quite as deadly as some other things. Is that right?
So some versions of flu can be. Coronaviruses, a lot of flus and common colds that we get are in the family of coronaviruses. The reason flu isn't as deadly in most people as something like coronavirus is it's not what they call a novel virus. So it's something that we have all year round. We have flu season, sorry. So obviously October time, people start to get a bit sick, and then again in February. They're some of the fastest mutating viruses that we know of. So hence you have a new flu every season, but they're not mutating enough that we don't have some immune response to them. So we can react, our bodies react, and we can live with them.
Okay, and the fact that they're not mutating so much, is that why we're able to sort of get a vaccine out fairly quickly as well? Because obviously you can get vaccinated against the flu usually fairly soon after it arrives.
Yeah, so all the way through the year, every year, there are scientists working away in labs trying to predict where in the genome, in that virus's DNA, that it's going to mutate. So it is a prediction. They sometimes get it right, they sometimes don't. But generally you can keep the flu at bay, and generally it's not severe enough that it will cause a pandemic such as this.
Okay, and you also mentioned the cold and the common cold, which a lot of us have suffered from over the years. What about that then? So how does that differ from the flu? Why don't we have a vaccine for that?
So the common cold is this little guy here.
Mm-hmm.
So normally these viruses also, they infect your upper respiratory tract, so your nose, your throat, your sinuses, which is why you get cough and cold and the sniffles. The most common virus, which is what this one's based off of, so he's got these little bumps around. They'll have, it's called a rhonavirus, picornavirus, which has 99 known serotypes, so 99 different versions of the same thing. So it's really hard to make a cure for something that has that many different versions. And also there's not really much need because it's quite a mild irritant to our body. The toxin it produces and the result of our immune system is quite mild in comparison to other things like flu or corona.
Yeah, so we just suffer really with sneezing and high temperature but it's not deadly for us. Now, of course, there are some other things that you can get from food, which is why you've got to have food hygiene. Tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, so you've got E. coli, which is probably one of the most common that we have. It's a bacteria that's found in our intestines. In most healthy people, you have lots of bacteria in your gut anyway. But some types, specifically with the very catchy name of O157H7, some types like that, they cause toxins such as Shiga, which is what causes your food poisoning. And that's what your body's reacting to, and that's what makes you sick. So it produces the toxin to kill, your body produces the toxin to kill the bacteria, but in doing so, it makes you a little bit sick. Most people will recover from that. It's not necessarily life-threatening unless you're a really small infant or you have a weak immune system anyway. Some of those can lead to a urinary tract infection or respiratory illness, such as pneumonia or meningitis, and that's when that becomes serious.
Okay. And we've often heard about Salmonella in the kitchen. So where does that come from?
Oh, yeah. So Salmonella, it's another one. Great virus, great bacteria. We also get that from eating infected foods. So it's mostly associated with eggs, meat, and poultry. But it can be cross-contaminated in kitchens. So vegetables and fruit can also carry it, which is why it's really important that you wash your hands when you're cooking. You only use your knife and your chopping board for raw meat separate to your vegetables, and also why people stack their fridges. So you have meat at the bottom and your vegetables above that. So if anything drips down from it, it's not going to affect your vegetables and things like that. Cooking will kill most of them. So heating it to 75 degrees is the sort of standard advice to killing it, but it will be killed off about 55 degrees after about 90 minutes. So they're not very immune to heat.
Okay. There are also some other nasty things you can catch. So typhoid is also transmitted through waste and so forth, isn't it? And that's a bit more nasty. So
typhoid looks very similar to Salmonella. They're from a similar kind of family. So they're spread through the contamination, mainly of water, but sometimes food, with fecal matter. So if there isn't good plumbing or sewage in an area such as refugee camps, it's often common, which is why we don't see it very often in the UK compared to other places. We have very good sewage, very good plumbing, and just a general awareness of hygiene. In areas where you do have poverty, it is very dangerous because unlike viruses, which will mainly infect only a certain type of cell, which is why a lot of viruses you see only infect your respiratory tract up here, the bacteria can infect any cell really, most areas of your body, so many of your organs, which is why things like this, you'll get loads of different symptoms.
Okay. Well, so when we're a child, we're often immunized against a certain number of common ailments. One of them is chickenpox. So a lot of children will nowadays be immunized against chickenpox. That's not so bad though, is it?
Chickenpox that's a virus as well. It's highly contagious. So mainly through droplets, which is why you're told to cover your mouth when you sneeze, wash your hands, things like that. If you get it as a child, it is less severe than if you get it when you're older. Lots of different reasons for that, which is why often your parents will take you to sort of chickenpox parties, and they don't hate you, they are just trying to protect you from when you're a little bit older. Although if your parents are like mine, then you end up with severe cases like this.
Oh dear.
There we go. So that was an unhappy Evie as a baby with lots of chickenpox.
Oh my goodness.
So again, it's not so bad when you're a little kid, but when you get it older, it is much more severe. Also, when you're older, it can come back. You keep a small amount of the virus in your body, so you can get something called shingles, which again is when you're older, and it's normally a lot worse than chickenpox as a child.
Yeah. Interesting. And measles is another one that you're vaccinated against. Now that's very contagious, isn't it?
Yeah, measles is one of the world's most contagious diseases. It's another virus called the rubella virus, one of the strains of rubella virus, which lives in the mucus and the snot and things when you're infected. Main symptoms of measles will be lots of runny eyes, a rash on the face, sore throat, and a temperature, sort of those general ill symptoms from your immune system reacting. But where it becomes really dangerous is it can cause pneumonia or something called encephalitis, which is where if it reaches your lungs, it can cause that pneumonia, or if it reaches your brain. And then you can get swelling, and that can become deadly. We do have a really effective virus for it, the MMR virus, which most people will have had. So it protects you against mumps, which is another respiratory virus, measles, and rubella, which is another respiratory virus, causes lots of flu-like symptoms. The UK was measles free for about 3 years, I think it was. But now we have less than 95% of our population is vaccinated. And if you have that level of people vaccinated, then you have something called herd immunity. So kind of what they're trying to create with COVID is that enough people are immune to it that it's just not in circulation anymore. Unfortunately, we've become a bit lax with vaccinating children. So we are seeing a rise in cases. A lot of that is linked to a study that is now wrong. No one believes it anymore in the scientific community, linking vaccines to autism, which, as I say, is incorrect, but has caused that drop in number of people vaccinated. So we are seeing an increase, particularly in university students around my age. A lot of that coming, you're mixing with lots of different people, so you're mixing lots of different germs, and a lot of international students as well. So you're becoming in contact with things you just haven't been in contact with.
Yeah, and so we should finish off by mentioning COVID-19, of course, because everybody knows about it. Lots of people are becoming experts, but it's a really interesting time for science and for microbiologists to understand a bit more about it. What kind of things are going on now? What are they trying to find? What are they trying to do?
So what they're trying to find at the moment is obviously trying to predict how we can create a vaccine. There's lots of different methods for that. So the main one they're looking at is, so this isn't specifically a coronavirus toy, but I don't know if you can see, it's got these little bumps all over it. And those is why it's called coronavirus, because it looks like a crown. Corona is coming from the Latin of crown. Fun fact. But so they're trying to see what those little bumps actually connect to when they find a cell, and that's how they infect it. So on our cells, we have things called receptors. So specifically with the coronavirus, it's called an ACE receptor. I don't know what it stands for. And that's how it gets things in and out of the cell. That's how the cell survives. So what they're trying to do is disrupt that interaction with a vaccine, potentially is stopping that connection in the first place. The other one, the drug that's been in the news quite a lot recently, dexamethasone, can't remember how you say it. So that one is an anti-inflammatory and an immunosuppressant. So it stops the inflammation in the area, which is going to treat the symptoms, but it also stops the cell actually replicating. And as we said earlier, I don't know if you remember, so the virus uses your cell to replicate. It uses all the stuff already in there because it can't do it on its own. And it stops that process, very, very complicated, but it stops that. And therefore the cell can't replicate, so the cell then dies and kills off the virus in doing so. There's a lot of research to go. We are quite lucky. So COVID is the disease caused by the coronavirus, which is as I say, we know a lot about coronaviruses in general. You've had lots of colds, lots of different flus. SARS was something that happened how many years ago? So I think this is the third serious outbreak of coronavirus types that we've had in this decade. So we do know a lot about it, but it's finding out specifically to this virus what we can actually do for it.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Evie. Thank you very much for joining us. That was really interesting, and hopefully we've got some microbiologists in the audience who will be able to help us in the future. We'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Bye.